Got a great interview for you today on TYT Interviews. Jeff Stanzler, he's the creator of Sovereign Soul, and he's a really interesting filmmaker, award-winning filmmaker, and the show that he's created, this Sovereign Soul, is fascinating. So, Jeff, welcome to the Young Turks, and tell me about Sovereign Soul. What's your elevator pitch? What is it?
Elevator pitch. All right, start the stop clock. I got a bit of advice doing some research. I met a recently retired FBI field agent, and he told me words to live by. He said, the only way to ever know what you really need to know is to put yourself into places where you're not supposed to be. So I heard that and was like a fire horse getting a whiff of smoke, and I just started chasing it, and this story crystallized about a guy who is a former FBI field agent, but he's not retired. He's been relegated to a desk job because he uncovered a massive and systemic act of corruption, some defense contract bid rigging. And obviously the powers that be and his superiors weren't too happy about that. So they stuck him at this desk, and he's approached by another former FBI field agent who's now left to go work for one of those multinational conglomerates, who says to him, listen, I got a Faustian bargain for you. Keep your desk job, keep your security clearance, but on the weekends and at night, I want you to go back to doing what you do best, which is put yourself into places where you're not supposed to be. I want you to infiltrate extremist groups, both on the left and on the right, both nonviolent and violent, and I want you to give the information to me. So our central character, Drake, he takes the bargain. And he has to. He's got a 5-year-old daughter who has some severe learning disabilities. So pretty soon, we're in the middle of a very intense political thriller about a guy who's got to be in 5 places all at the same time. If he's 1 minute late to any of these places, he's a dead man. And I don't know if I did it under 30, but I did my damn best.
Well, first of all, you started with defense contract bid rigging, and I thought, so this is nonfiction.
This is nonfiction. Yeah, well, Duke Cunningham might have a cameo after.
That's right.
Yeah.
Although that's a bit old school, because then they fixed that by just stopping the bidding entirely.
Right.
Then
just give it to Halliburton.
Yeah, Halliburton was like, oh, bid rigging, we don't need to do that. We just make it no bids. Right? We get it automatically.
True.
Problem solved.
There might be some stuff around the edges that still gets bid on.
Right. And then bribery is illegal. Let's just make it legal.
Absolutely.
Problem solved.
Problem, yes.
Right.
Easy for them.
But like that opening scene that you're basically describing there is compelling, because the minute he says, okay, you got to infiltrate the extremist groups, both on the left and the right, you're like, interesting, right? So the right wing is fertile ground, and I want to get to that in a second.
Right.
But are there extremist groups on the left?
They're, I don't want to make a false equivalence here. Definitely the right-wing extremist groups are better armed and better trained militarily. But I will say that, you saw a bit of it during the Occupy Wall Street era, when you saw some pretty extreme anarchistic thoughts being introduced. You have seen a couple of violent incidents. There was the guy who went into Tony Perkins' organization. I'm blanking on the name. He shot up a guard.
Council?
Oh, you're good. Yeah, Family Research Council, and he had all the Chick-fil-A sandwiches he was going to rub on people's faces, and
Wow, that's weird that I don't remember that story.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
It is crazy. It is crazy. And you could even extend it, although maybe not as resolutely, to the gentleman who killed the 2 policemen in Brooklyn, saying that he was playing off.
Yeah,
Black
that guy
Lives
was just
Matter.
kind of crazy. I don't mean, I know the right wing says the same thing,
right.
but my point being that he was not part of any organization.
True.
Right? And he didn't see, well, I guess, I don't know. No, maybe it's fair to say he had a political agenda.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I mean, he wanted to kill cops. And he wanted to kill cops, and maybe it was a death wish in the process.
Right.
But, it's hard to say that mentality wouldn't have existed without what was going on, in Ferguson and Staten Island.
Yeah, that's an interesting case. Today I covered the story on the Young Turks of a white guy who did some robbery, and he had on his forehead, "Fuck cops." And so if he killed people, he didn't, he just robbed the place, but it was a violent robbery. Would that have been political? I don't know. So it's an interesting case. Because that guy was such oddball. I mean, I think he was a gang member, so he hated cops for other reasons too. And the white guy I covered today hated cops for completely different reasons. Right. So, but of course there are people on the left that have extremist agendas. There's the environmental groups, right?
That's true.
Obviously, the overwhelming majority of environmental groups are peaceful and want to save the earth.
Correct.
So, but have the best of intentions. Right. But there are some that do property damage, right?
Yes. No, it's true. It's true. And, you know, it's hard to say that protesting, organizing, as limited as it has been, it's hard to say that there can't be some people out there who are getting antsy. And, you know, like I said, I don't in any way want to make a false equivalence. But I, in my research and in my life and travels, am starting to feel that there's a contingent of Americans who feel like, you know, if Hillary is it, if that's the best we got, then it's over unless something drastic takes place. And whether it leads them to property damage or worse, I don't know. But certainly I think that sentiment is brewing.
That's interesting. I mean, I hope not. I know a lot of people think if it's Hillary, then what's the point, right? But I hope they're not taking Feel the Burn literally, right? Which I don't think they are.
Right.
I mean, so, but look, but that's the that's the nature of the two different sides.
Right.
I mean, the one side is against the war, and the other side is not only pro-war, pro-bombing, but pro-heavy artillery within our country. So that's why it would be a false equivalence to say those two sides are equally armed or equally dangerous.
Right.
They have different philosophies. It doesn't mean that no one on the left can do anything wrong, as we just described here, described in great detail here. It's of course possible. And in the old days, the leftists used to be, just as violent throughout the
Weather
world.
Underground and
right. There was some here in America, no question, Weather Underground, etc. But especially throughout the world, the anarchists would do violence, the leftists would do violence. Now, luckily, 222 hasn't happened too much recently. Now, let's turn to the right wing. Now, there,
yes,
we do have a lot of groups. So
and a lot of guns.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Before we even get into those groups, I'm kind of amazed that there's no current TV show. I mean, you've planned this show out. Yeah. It's a really interesting idea. How could there be no TV shows on? Because it seems like such an obviously interesting thing to base a drama around.
I couldn't agree more. And you know, it's funny, and you could actually extend the question to journalism. You know, why is it when Jared Miller and Amanda Miller go into that pizza parlor in Vegas and kill two cops and put "Don't Tread on Me" flags over them, that's a half a news cycle story? And you know, you could say, you know, the NRA has a significant influence, and you know, their lobbyists are not going to want to see that be around the clock coverage, you know, as much as what happened in San Bernardino. But I think it's deeper than that. I think, you know, it's easier to say, you know, oh, that threat to me, you know, I can see him a half a mile away. He looks different than me. He speaks a different language than me. He prays to a different God than me. That is somehow easier to compute than, geez, my neighbor who goes, his kids go to my school and he goes to my church. That's the threat to me, you know. And to me, as a storyteller, that's where the fascination is, you know, trying to figure out, you know, where that comes from, and why are we so unable to sort of accept that as part of who we are?
Well, so I have a slightly different take on it. I think your theories on why we don't see it as much are perfectly good and probably part of the answer, I'm sure. My take is that we don't like the ugly truth. So if it's us, we're not interested in that story, right? So, I mean, why do we never talk about all the coups and assassinations the CIA did all across the world? I mean, it just almost never comes up.
Right.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable, right?
We're the good guys.
Yeah,
we
we're
wouldn't
the good
do
guys.
that.
Yeah. All the civilian bombings that we've done across the world today under Obama. Right. You mean you bring it up with Democrats, and they just literally refuse to believe it. I was at a gathering of very significant progressives here in LA, and half the room was like, "No, I see no evil. I hear no evil. If you tell me Obama killed civilians in drone strikes, then I just refuse to listen to you." Right? I won't acknowledge it. Right? So I think that it's when it's us, it's uncomfortable.
It's deep-seated.
Yeah, don't tell me about that. And if you tell me about that, I'm going to dislike you rather than the actions. And then on the other hand, we love to talk about the other. The other is so scary.
Right.
And it's wonderfully cohesive for us to talk about the other. Like, it makes us feel better. It makes us feel like a united tribe. We're not the problem. They're the problem, right?
They're breeding them over there. They're breeding them to hate us.
So, I mean, look, you have the enormously obvious disparity in this country between how Muslim terrorism is treated and right-wing terrorism is treated. So, the Republicans had a debate the other night about terrorism and national security, and they will never once mention Planned Parenthood shooting.
Right.
That just happened.
Right.
A cop was killed. Don't you care? I thought you guys cared about cops, right? And so, I mean, I can go on, and we know that there's 5 times as many right-wing extremist attacks in America as Muslim extremist attacks. 5 times as many. We know that, but almost no one else knows that because the media doesn't cover it. Nobody talks about it. It's uncomfortable. And not only the Republicans didn't want to talk about it, CNN didn't ask a single question about it. If you're talking about national security, one's 5 times a bigger threat than the other one, right? Okay, but it's not just the Muslim versus right wing, which is stark. It's also black versus white. And here's what I mean by that. So O'Reilly and Fox News is constantly talking about, oh, Black Lives Matter, it hates cops, and they once had a chant that was unpleasant, and yada, yada. Meanwhile, Robert Deere, the Planned Parenthood guy, killed a cop. So what? Nothing, right? The Millers killed 2 cops. Nothing. And I can give you 24 cases of right-wing extremists, oftentimes calling in cops just to execute them.
Lighting their house on fire, waiting in the bushes.
That's right. Literally. Yet, but okay, I get it from the perspective of the media. I guess we don't want to hear about it. I get it certainly from the Republican perspective. Don't talk about it because that's uncomfortable. But for TV, you would think that, God, I mean, it's made for drama. So has it been easy, hard? What's been the reaction you're getting?
There's a fascination. Again, it's nobody likes to lead. Nobody wants to be the first to sort of turn the camera, away from Syria back to, the heartland of America. But, I think we're starting to get through. And I think, the way I look at it, I defer to you, your opinion on this. I think Obama is going to come out for an executive order on background checks before the end of his term. And when the day that happens, the nature of this country, the heartbeat of this country, I think is going to switch very, very quickly.
Oh, that's interesting. So what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think the people who believe in Agenda 21 will feel that, this is the shot across the bow. I mean, Agenda 21, that UN resolution, non-binding, that I think started in George H.W. Bush's
That's right,
term.
Decades ago.
But, as we know, Ted Cruz is campaigning on fighting against Agenda 21, which basically says jackbooted UN thugs are going to come take away your guns. Now, if Obama says that, he's going to make this executive order, I feel like the people who are maybe a little bit on the fence might be pulled into that, sort of Alex Jones world of, this is it, folks. You gotta circle the wagons and get ready. And I think I'll be glad if I'm in an area that has very little guns on the day that happens, I have to say.
That's interesting. Yeah, okay, now you frightened me a little bit.
I didn't mean to, but we all know that the people who have guns, that the gun ownership per capita has gone down, but gun sales have gone up. So the people who have guns have arsenals.
Yeah, more
so
guns. That's
it's
right.
That is reason for concern because you don't need 20 assault rifles unless you're preparing for something.
Your TV show could also start on that day. The day that Obama does the executive order and people lock and load. So let's talk about Agenda 21 for a second. So as you mentioned, it's a harmless UN resolution that was non-binding and passed decades ago. But Ted Cruz, even on his website, said that the government is going to force us into hobbit homes.
Right.
That was the language he used on his Senate website. Yeah. Like, so that's crazy. That's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So
well, here's the thing. The thing is, yeah, I think that, like, from my viewpoint, I think that's crazy. But, you know, I mean, and this is something I want reflected in the show. I think somebody who's living in a country that sees their rights, their at least rights to privacy eroding, their wages stagnant, jobs going overseas, I think from that fear comes the thought that maybe that is all lining up against me. And, you know, it might make somebody who hasn't had the advantages I think we've had to have, you know, at least a more well-rounded education, open to that sort of thinking. So, you know, I mean, I don't, and, you know, it's interesting you mentioned Ferguson, because in Ferguson, there was this really fascinating video that was captured on a street corner where a couple of the sovereign citizens had come to the protest openly carrying assault rifles. And a couple of the Black Lives Matter's leaders came to talk to them and say, you're intimidating our people, why are you doing it? And the conversation that was recorded was between two groups who were both seeming very well tuned into what was going on, very well educated. Nobody was a shit-kicking Yahoo. And, you know, it kind of makes you think that these are people who want to protect their family, just like you and I do. They're choosing methods that perhaps you and I would not, but I think for the vast majority of them, except for those who've sort of gone off the reservation, for the vast majority of them, they're doing what they think is necessary in a country that its leaders are corrupt, that what they were expecting for their children doesn't appear to be there, and they're trying to protect their families the best way they can.
See, it's funny you mention that because I want to do a talk show version of your show almost. It's definitely different, obviously. You don't do dramas. But I kind of, I've always had this.
You might have some fight scenes, though.
Yeah, well, you know, I hope not, but it might. But I don't want it to be cheesy, you know, TV where people are throwing chairs and stuff.
Right.
My idea is always, hey, let's get the Tea Party guys together with the environmentalists and force them into a room for an extended period of time. And you can play games around it, you know, make it kind of like a reality show, but give them enough time to understand each other and see what comes out.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, because the truth is that it kind of comes from the same place. I mean, the left and the right are kind of going so far apart that they're standing next to each other.
So, yeah, I don't know that they're. I think you're right. I think the essence
Tea Partiers true Tea Partiers don't like cronyism. You know, they don't like surveillance. You know, they don't like jobs being sent overseas. And you could say that of the most extreme Occupy Wall Streeter as well.
You can say that of mainstream progressives.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I think you're really onto something that the grievances are similar. Of course, me being on the left in America, I feel like they've been misdirected, the ones on the right. So they've got that anger about the bank bailout. They should be angry. I mean, they walked away with billions, if not trillions of dollars of our money. Why the hell did we allow that, right? And they feel like their politicians are screwing them. Goddamn right they are, right? And all these rights are being taken away. But that anger is taken, and literally the Koch brothers, sometimes it's literally them, sometimes it's people like the Koch brothers, the donors, the corporations, et cetera, rolling buses. So right after the Tea Party was formed, they're so angry at the bank bailouts, the Koch brothers sent buses to their rallies to pick them up that said, "Stop Obamacare." And they got driven to anti-healthcare rallies. So I don't think they realized, wait, I got on this bus to protest Wall Street. How come I never protested Wall Street? Never. Like the whole thing was born of I'm so angry at the banks for taking my money, yet they never had a single bank protest. And they didn't realize, wait, who paid for this bus? And why does it have that Obamacare thing? And wait, I'm Ghanaian, but they forgot, but they got the anger. They got the anger.
Keep the government off my, out of my Medicare.
Yeah. Exactly. Keep your government hands off my Medicare. But it's brilliant. I mean, that's so the donor class thought, ooh, I got a nice spigot of anger here. If it's against me, I'm going to have a lot of trouble, but I got an idea. Yeah. Let me just turn it a little bit and actually turn it against their own interest and have them argue that I should pay them less than minimum wage, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So I hear you that they've got legitimate grievances, but the way that they address that oftentimes are not legitimate.
Not legitimate. No.
And so of the right-wing groups, I know this is super rough, but what percentage are dangerous? So, because I imagine most are not, that they're just angry folks who want to protest their government, which is as American a thing as you could do. But what percentage are like, I'm protesting / I have my gun ready?
I mean, it would be hard for me to say. I haven't done a phone survey.
Right. No, I know. That's why I asked.
But I will say, how many people showed up at the Bundy Ranch? How quickly? How organized? And I was following, very closely what was going on at the Bundy Ranch, and I feel if one of those BLM officers had tripped over a rock, or one of the sovereign citizens had tripped over a rock and a gun had gone off, it would have been tens, maybe hundreds of people who would have died out in that Nevada desert. And also, I don't even know if you covered it here, but I'd love you to. There's a guy in West Virginia named, I'm hoping I get his name right, Thomas David Deegan, who was trying to take over the West Virginia Capitol and hold the governor and other officials, put them under arrest, and hoping to inspire sovereign citizens in other states to do the same. And apparently he was arrested just a couple of days before this was going to be enacted. So the idea, and you see videos online of guys now saying, we got to stand up for our brother Tommy and get him released from jail. It's not small. It's certainly not small. But I would say the tactics of a lot of sovereign citizens to not pay taxes, not have a driver's license, to pay off legal parking tickets and things like that with stacks of pennies because they want to screw with the government. I mean, that is huge, huge.
So are sovereign citizens the most dangerous group out there? Because they don't believe in the government and the government's authority. So oftentimes when I see a cop being shot, oftentimes it's too strong. It's certainly not the majority, but a lot of times when I see cops getting shot, they're sovereign citizens that got in a standoff with them.
Well, you've heard of the 3 percenters as well, right?
Yeah.
And the 3 percenters, they call themselves that because they say, whether or not this is true or not, but they say that only 3% of the American colonies stood up with arms against the British Army.
Oh yeah, that's
and we
totally
won.
Not true, but yeah.
So yeah, but so their thinking is if only 3% of us are armed and we have these arsenals, we can make a difference. And the truth is, they could.
No, see, it's again slight misdirection that makes all the difference. They have a kernel of truth in there, which they then take in the wrong direction. If 3% if a movement is able to capture 3% of the country, it almost always wins.
Right.
So that is a phenomenon that exists. That's an international phenomenon, and that has worked in many different protests and movements.
I hate to say Hitler, but he had 6 guys, right, when he started?
I don't know. I don't know that part. But but then they take it and go, okay, now if the 3% were armed, no, and then we could take over the country. No, it's political movements that capture the imagination of the people. That's why they win, because the 3% wind up affecting the other 97% with ideas. It's the 3% don't grab machine guns and then take over the United States military. That's not what's ever happened, and you misunderstood the whole thing. And if you think that's what's going on, that's super dangerous. I can't believe they're not doing a TV show about this.
They will be soon. We will be soon.
Okay, so where are you? I don't know if you're allowed to discuss it. Are you going to the different cable companies?
Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to, as you know, once you get into business with networks and cable outlets that are beholden to certain sponsors, there immediately becomes decisions being made to temper what you feel is the truth. So to do an end around to that.
I wouldn't know anything about
Yeah,
that.
I know you wouldn't. I know you. I'm educating you.
Yeah, okay, all right. Interesting.
But lucky for me, I'm also an educator. Actually, all the people I brought with me here are my former students. And my good friend Callie told me, listen, what we should do is start an Indiegogo campaign to shoot a prologue season 1. And if we could start with Young Turks viewers, we feel that they have the education, the passion to accept this story, and from there we'll just branch out. I mean, the first season of Breaking Bad was geeks in dorm rooms watching the show, and then by the time its final season, your grandmother and mine was, tuning in just to see what happened with good old Walter White. So that is the plan, and then once that train has left the station, then we'll see which network will be lucky enough to have us.
So has the Indiegogo campaign has not begun yet?
It has begun, but we'll be.
It has begun.
No, we'll be starting in January.
Starts in January. Okay, that's exciting.
It is. It is.
Okay. How much are you hoping to raise?
We are hoping to raise $80,000 to shoot the
Oh, that's
first.
it? And I say that's it, like 80,000. Oh, no big deal, right? No, the reason I say that is because I know that TV production can be enormously expensive.
Right.
So how are you going to do it on 80 grand?
Well, luckily for me, I grew up in the independent film world, and we know how to make an exciting thriller such as this with techniques and with people that understand how to make a budget like that work. Now, that being said, we do have, what are they called, reach goals? Where if we raise a certain amount above that, we'll be able to do certain set pieces and extended episodes to make that first season, that much more exciting. But at its core, we feel that this first season could be done for that amount.
So how many episodes in the season?
We're going to have 4 10-minute episodes for the first season.
Oh, I see, 4 10-minute episodes.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I get it.
No, it's not going to be. It's not going to be 12.
I'm picturing Game of Thrones here.
Yeah,
I'm like, how are you going to pay for the White Walkers on 80 grand? Okay, but I think that, and I've seen your deck, your presentation, and it's enormously impressive.
Thank you.
So, I believe, and so, and the good thing about an 80 grand goal, I think, is that it is doable. And if you have it and it's catching on fire a little bit, well, that obviously makes your case. I mean, but the idea that you'd be able to start something in media by yourself and have it take off and work.
Well, I'm a vanguard.
That'll never happen.
I've only seen Mad as Hell about 6 times, so it gets me going.
God bless. That's awesome. All right, so, last thing. How'd you get into this line of work in the first place?
I was going to City College in New York. I needed to take an elective class. They said you can take pottery or you can take world cinema. And I said, what are you doing in world cinema? They said, oh, you watch movies and you talk about them. And then that was kind of my gateway drug.
So you eventually wound up winning the Independent Spirit Award for Best Screenplay?
I was nominated. They stole it from me, but yeah.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Nominated. My bad. So you've worked with, Robin Wright, Tim Roth, James Gandolfini, Samuel Jackson, yada yada.
Yes.
Then
a lot of great people.
Attaboy Pictures, HBO, all these amazing things. So I can't help but ask. So how'd you go from I don't know, I'll take this elective class to working with all these people?
Well, I think it really was that world cinema class when I saw films like The Bicycle Thieves, and you saw a father struggling with his child in Rome in 1950 something, I can't remember the exact date, and I felt so connected to it. I said, there's a power here, I always wanted to be an activist. I think I suck at it. I'm trying to get better at it. I always wanted to move people because, I do believe that outrage is the purest form of hope. You can't be outraged unless you know things can be better. And when I make a film and now a TV show, it's because I really feel in my soul that things can be better and that, yes, maybe this sovereign citizen group and Black Lives Matter group can understand that shouldn't be opposed to each other. They should be on the same side. It's the same side. It's the people at the 0.001% that are very successfully circumventing their American dream. So that is, I think, it's obviously not the quickest way to get financed and to be successful, but it's what drives me, and I've never looked back.
Well, I hear you, brother. I mean, there was a person sitting in that seat just a couple of months ago who thought the same thing, and his name was Norman Lear, and he wound up affecting a whole generation of Americans.
Me included.
Yeah, and so sometimes when you dream a dream and you think, hey, maybe this will reach somebody, right? And you do it in the form of entertainment, sometimes it works.
Sometimes it works. Yeah, I mean, after All the President's Men, journalism schools applications just went through the roof, and I mean, something happened bad since then with journalism, but for that brief shining moment, it was big.
And it goes in waves. It goes in waves, and the good moments will come back as well. All right, the show is going to be called Sovereign Soul. Indiegogo.
Indiegogo. And do you want to watch the...
Oh, yes. I almost forgot. I got so wrapped up in the thing. So let's take a quick look to see how it's going to turn out, okay? All right,
a little piece.
Is America in decline? The world's only superpower struggles with
Not only
debt.
are Americans worried about tomorrow, they're also pretty scared of today.
The rich are getting richer while everybody else remains stagnant or in bad shape. Should we be ashamed?
One of the most powerful politicians in New York was arrested for corruption charges.
The military and the police have
95% of California is in drought.
Don't pause, don't question the instructions that are being given.
Without the threat here to our homeland, sovereign citizen extremists.
If we unite under one banner of freedom and fight for our children's liberty and the Constitution.
Alongside our men and our friends and our families.
Me, I'm going to use my training. I'm supposed to become one of those domestic terrorists that you're so afraid of.
You must disperse the area immediately.
I think that Ferguson is the first wave of an incoming tsunami. We can do this the peaceful, nonviolent way, or we can just let it descend into chaos.
What's your name? What's your name?
I left the Army as a conscientious objector. These medals don't mean anything to me, and they can have them back.
You come to my house and you kill my wife, you kill my daughter, and I'm probably going to strap on a suicide vest and go to one of your checkpoints.
3 activists were arrested on terror charges for an alleged plot to attack President Obama's campaign headquarters. The so-called NATO 3 say they were set up by government informants.
You're an out-of-control federal government that's robbed trillions of dollars. What do? You infiltrate militias, or you just flat out set them up.
It's in this place you'll see me. Brace yourself, because this goes deep. I'll show you the secrets to the sky and the birds. Actions speak louder than words. Stand by me, my apprentice. Be brave. Clench fists.
What's HBO doing?
I don't know.
I mean, that's made for HBO. Okay, but somebody should steal it out from underneath them first, right?
I'm going to, man.